Yes, originally this talk at DevFest was improve your JavaScript by 5,482% in 8 seconds or something ridiculous like that. I made up the title, then I tried to figure out what the talk would be, which is mostly how I live my life, by just coming up with nonsense all the time and then being stuck having to do it later when somebody actually lets me, which this should be a sign that I should not apply for things. And Pamela reached out to me about doing that same talk here. And she went, that talk was really good and I really liked it, but you had an hour there. I'm going to give you 15 minutes. Can you do it in 15 minutes? And I was like, that's not a problem, Pam. I can totally do it in 15. I should have thought about that before I said anything. And so what I've done is I've kind of cut it down to just one aspect of that, just one piece of that talk, the part that I enjoy the most of that, and that's something called Deno. Has anybody here heard of Deno? Show of hands. Cool, like 3, 4 people. Awesome. This would be lots of fun for everyone else. Before I get to that, who here does like web dev, TypeScript, JavaScript, Node? Right, about half of the people. Okay. So this is really hopefully going to make the half the people who've never heard of Deno really happy, and for the people who don't do Node or JavaScript development, want to start picking it up because it doesn't suck. So my name is Robert, as you heard. If you want to email me or look at stuff I do online, that's where I have my email is robert at whatever. SADev's my blog. I have a small consultancy called Good Name, and I run a conference called DevConf, which I will now plug because I'm an absolute shill, and that's why I come here to like force you to listen to me advertise. Like, subscribe, do all those things. DevConf is a conference. It's going to be in May this year. The full day event in Cape Town. We'll also have it in Johannesburg for people online. We have 35 speakers. We have international speakers, 750 attendees. It's going to be at the Century City Convention Center, just on the other side of the mall. Yeah, it's going to be amazing. Big swag bags. If you are interested in development in a general sense, it's a really great place to be and just hang out. And we cover a lot of different topics, from deep technical things, AI. We have people who are like getting doomed to run on weird pieces of hardware, all the way through to like mental health, how to grow your career, how to even, quit your job if the company will not sponsor GTG for future events. And that, you need to quit your job, then we can help. We're going to have some talks on being a consultant and a contractor. So it should be a lot of fun, that. But that marketing side done. The very first thing I showed at DevFest was this, right? This is how we all do development today, right? Like, get clone, I get my code down. I type out npm I and I install the modules, right? And it churns there for, I don't know, 2 minutes or something. Takes up a bunch of disk space. Then I fire up Visual Studio Code. Because Pamela was supposed to be here, I was going to change that to Fleet because, JetBrains is a sponsor, so we've got to have Fleet in there. And then you'd fire up Gemini and you go like, how do I get modules to work with TypeScript? Because I want to use TypeScript, but I don't know how to do modules and do they work. And at some point you've got some shitty code and you throw it at tsc.index, the TypeScript compiler, you type index.js and it churns, hopefully works. If it's like me, you get a whole bunch of errors. You fix those, you ask Gemini to fix them actually, then you carry on. And eventually you do node run index.js and hopefully like that's development, right? Like I've just described all of development to everyone. And it sucks. Like, I don't know if anybody enjoys any of this part. None of that's fun for me. And in fact, there's a picture there from the 2024 JavaScript survey, which goes into like a whole bunch of pain and suffering. And a lot more of these on the DevFest slides, but there's just like build tools, just how painful they are. And if you think about it, for the people who do Node or TypeScript development, how often are you spending time like actually fixing code problems, and how much are you spending trying to get like Webpack to just load an SVG on a web page with React, right? Like, it's just painful. And it's just this whole weird world that we've kind of ended up in, where we've got beautiful things like TypeScript, but they're kind of not integrated into anything. And we've got like NPM, and it's not really integrated, and it's all kind of discoupled. And so there's a guy called Ryan Dull, famously created Node and said, Node is awesome. I love Node. I built Node. And after 10 years of it, he was like, I should write it again, because, if you do something once and it was a success, maybe if you do it twice, you can be successful again. And he took all the learnings from Node and he created Deno. And Deno has now recently become Deno version 2.2 is released now. Deno in version 1 was kind of beta-ish. It worked. Probably didn't want to use it for production. But from Deno 2, I'm very bullish on, like, you can totally run it in production. So with that intro out the way of why you should care, I'm going to switch to some code to my command line here. Let me move this up to the people at the back, and we'll have a look. Right. So let's make a new directory. We'll call this first, and we'll go into first. And I'll just do that. It's empty, right? Like nothing up the sleeves, the magician's whole thing, right? And now I want to start writing some JavaScript, and I want to print some stuff to the screen. And I could do, if we go back here, I could do that nonsense. We could be here all day. But rather, with Deno, you just type Deno init. Cool. So now I've got Deno set up. And since JetBrains is sponsoring it, let's run Fleet. I know I do joke about don't use Visual Studio, crossing out Visual Studio Code. I actually use Fleet every day. It is an amazing IDE from JetBrains. I use Visual Studio Code every day as well. But yeah, if you're not used to, if you've never seen it, if you're working with Kotlin particularly, it worked really, really well. So you'll see here we've created up this little project. You'll see we've got some TypeScript in here, fairly normal. That should be pretty simple for everyone, nice and simple. And we have a console log here. I'll talk about this special line in a moment. It's also created a test file, which I'll show you in a moment. Again, this is not like Jest if you're used to JavaScript testing. This is actually Deno's own test framework, but it is Jest compatible. Okay, 6 minutes? 18 minutes. Oh, cool. I could just, you guys are in trouble now. And we have a Deno.json, similar to package.json if you're used to Node or anything like that. Cool. And so we have that in there. And so what I can do here is I can just go Deno run main.ts, right? And it runs. Okay. No TSC, no anything. If we have a look at what the files in here look like, it's just those three. There's not a node modules or anything like that. There's no crazy complexity in there. We can also have tasks. So I can go Deno run dev. Sorry, I jumped back quite quickly there. There is a task definition in my JSON file. And you'll see that's now got a full task runner, right? This is all built in. There's no extra. And for me, so if I go in here and change that, you'll see now it's updating there. And the whole time, if I just keep changing these, it will keep giving us different answers. And that's what I quite like about it. A lot of the time on projects, when you start them off, oh, what unit test framework are we going to use? What test run are we going to use? What are we going to do for type compilation? All of that is thought through for you. And I'll talk about some of the other cool stuff it has there. That's really, really, really simple, right? Nothing too fancy in that one. Let's make it, actually, this here is quite cool. I said I would talk about this one. This here just says, if it's been run from the main live file, you can print this out. If not, don't print it out. It just allows you to kind of choose when you want to show certain things, because maybe you want to have this as a pure library. And so you don't want to show this in the code that if you're using this as a library, if somebody's importing it. But one of the important design decisions of Deno is that it's supposed to be browser API compatible. So Node looks at the world and goes, we need to build APIs. We will implement JavaScript. And then for things that we don't have, we'll implement our own thing that's different. And Deno goes, we only implement what browsers implement. So obviously we have console.log, right? Which everyone knows. So we can just run that one there. Hello world. But like, do you know that in your browser you can do %C on console.log? Anyone? No? Oh, like this will work in your favorite browser. If your favorite browser is a good one, I don't know. You know, probably not Edge. Who knows about Edge? I don't know. So we can go console.log, right? Like in here, I'll show you the %C hello. And what C lets you do, actually, I don't want to space there. Lets you do is put in CSS. Right? Like, that's cool. Guess what you can do in Deno? Same thing, right? Color, red. And if we go back to the command line and run it, it's kind of pinky red. All right. So that was, you know, whatever your favorite. Oh, that's the wrong thing. I thought I was in Fleet. You can also do RGBs and all of that sort of stuff. You can do bold, I think, as well, and underline, all of that sort of stuff, because it's very important for them from a design perspective to support what your browser supports, so that your code you write in and that runs in Deno runs in your browser. They don't want to try and reinvent the wheel, which I think is an amazing idea. So all your browser knowledge, all of that can go across. You don't have to worry about that. I don't know how to get rid of this. If only Pamela was here and I could complain about JetBrains. Cool. So that's nice and simple. Let's have a look at something a little bit more complex. So I, like any good baker, created a little program earlier. And we'll just pop that open here. Yeah, we trust that folder. Cool. So you'll see here in this program, all right, that's fine, it's good here. We have a main file. I don't have any unit tests in here because, like everybody else, I say I do unit testing and never actually do it. But you have to know how to do it to pass the interview. So it's always a good skill to have. I've got the imports file. I also have a lock file, which, like in any sort of Node experience, is the actual versions of things. And the reason I have a lock file is because I have this line up here, which is slightly cut off by that little piece there. So you will know that if you're importing a module in Node, you have to like npm I and you install the module and then you do an import. The original design for Deno is, why do you need to go and import modules from like some special path? Why not just have URLs? URLs work, right? And so in Deno, you can just import a module from a URL, which I think is really awesome. There's some obvious problems there. This module here is for OpenAPI. And you'll see here some cool stuff. This I took straight off of the OpenAPI website for how to like write code of their stuff. So I'm just creating an object here, which I get from the import. I do a top level await. Again, you know, Node has this in its latest like version 22 stuff. Deno has this from the start, but it's really just nice that it's there. So I have top level await. I don't have to do anything fancy there. And I create a chat message. I say, give me a joke about a duck and a programmer as the request to the API. Tell it to use GPT 4.0, and then I console print that, right? Nice and simple. So if we do Deno run in here, this will churn, and the interesting thing happened. Nothing happened, right? One of the big things around Deno is that security is baked in ways that are so much more impressive, right? So you'll see here, what it's saying is Deno is trying to access an environment variable on my computer called OpenAPI base URL. And it wants to know if that's okay. And so I can say yes, no, deny. It's going to ask for a lot of environment variables because the OpenAPI code wants a lot. So I'm just going to say capital A, allow all of those. It then asks, can I connect to that URL on the internet? And that, like, you know, might seem a bit weird. Like, why do we want this? Node just does it. Why should we have these? because if you're running code off the internet, like you're just going npm I and installing stuff, you don't know what that code does. British Airways 3 years ago now, had a problem where their website was capturing credit card information and sending it to an attacker somewhere. How did that happen? Some developer did npm I and installed a package, and that package was compromised. We call this type of attack a supply chain attack, and they had no idea until they started monitoring the outbound network traffic. You can't have that happen to you with Deno because you have to give it permissions for everything. So we can say A to that, and that's why it's really important to have that sort of stuff. So you can see, why did the programmer bring a duck to work? Because he needed help debugging his cracked code. Cool. You can specify permissions. You don't have to like yes every time. That would suck on a server. You can actually say this environment variable is okay, this URL is okay, and it's nice and secure. Or you can also just pass capital A, and it won't prompt you for anything, and it just works. It's really, really nice and simple that way. Obviously, this is kind of freaky. If you think about it, I'm just like pulling stuff off the internet. The way this works is it pulls it down once initially and stores it on your hard drive, so it's not updating all the time. But you might not want that. You might want to be able to like, that's quite nice, especially if you're in a company though, right? You imagine a private repo in your company, you're not having to run like your own NPM stuff, it just works. But maybe you don't want to do that. Maybe you want to bring in something from NPM instead of this, because NPM has this huge wealth of libraries. Well, we can do that too. So instead of, we'd normally do npm install something, right? With Deno, you can just type Deno add npm OpenAI, right? And the npm prefix here will tell it to go to npm and get it. So we'll do that. It will download. Deno's own download system that they use for this is 3 times faster than npm. Not that it's a big deal in reality, but it's like roughly about 3 times faster. And now we can kill this line. Actually, we can kill just the from bit because we don't need that anymore. And I can say npm OpenAI. And so instead of just being limited to this weird URL and things like that, I now have access to everything that's in npm as well. Again, no node modules folder because Deno does it a lot smarter. Doesn't repeat the files, it stores it in one central place. So if you are using OpenAPI across multiple projects, one place, 1 bit of disk space used instead of 500. And if all my code worked right there, then this should just work again using the version from npm. If not, we'll say OpenAPI stack and Google Gemini is better, right? That's just taking way too long. Give it another sec. All right, you're just being silly. Yeah, it's Gemini. Gemini, come on. Right. So not only does Deno make it easier to work TypeScript, it makes it more secure. You can do all of this with JavaScript as well. It fully supports JavaScript, so that's not a problem. Deno does go a step beyond npm. So we've looked. You can get modules from just URLs, plain URLs. You can get modules from npm, but you can also get modules from their own repository called JSR. JSR is a really amazing thing. It's a re-evaluation or rethinking of npm. You don't have to use Deno for this. You can use any. You'll see here, I built one called Rainbow Text, which lets you create rainbow text. And you'll see here, it supports Deno. Actually, if I drop the drop down, npm yarn. So you can go, if you wanted to use this in npm, you just go run that command, and you can use this cool library in there. But JSR, I'm not going to go into too much detail, is just a nicer way of doing that sort of system. And it has cool things like scores, so you actually know that these packages have been built properly, and you know, because it's got a direct link to GitHub, that this is the real one and not somebody who's sort of stolen the URL or something like that. So we'll skip that in the effort of time, and we'll go back up one directory. Obviously, you have lots of projects today that you'd like to use. and I've been showing console apps and so on. I want to show you that you don't obviously use them to console apps with this. The question is, do I try the new thing I've never used before that just came out, or do I try the one that I know works? I heard one person go for new thing. Fine. Yeah, if it doesn't work, we'll try the other one. Right, so they've just changed this command. So this is, I want to create a React Vite app, right? I kid you not, I've never run this command. I was reading on my phone earlier, and I wrote it down in the book. I've never tried this. In theory, if this works, this will go and set up a React website. Do you fully trust that package? I guess. Sure. What could go wrong? I only do my banking on this machine. What's the biggest problem there? Well, that was quick. Right. What is the name of this? Magic, I guess. Right. Magic did not break. Deno. So now let's have a look what we got in here. We have a whole bunch of stuff. We've got README files, some JavaScript. We've got a package.json. There is no Deno in here though, right? This is the standard npm Vite setup. But we can still run Deno install because Deno knows how packages work because it wants to be happy with everything. And then let's have a look what's in the package.json before I run it. That's a normal Node package file. What I care about is the dev command. So Deno run dev. That looked cool. And open. There we go. Boom. Normal Vite and React. Yeah, it's a lot smoother on my machine, that little animation, but it's just all the Wi-Fi and so on. But yeah, like it is that easy to get that running. And that's just the normal process. There's nothing fancy in there. If we fire this up in Fleet, you'll see what's happened in here. I now have a Deno lock file, but the rest of this is exactly the version from npm. So it's all set up, it all works. So if you are building web stuff, that all works. Oh yeah, the other thing I want to show you, obviously, CSX's work, JSX's work, everything you're used to in web dev still works with Deno. And then for one final demo of Deno, I want to show you OpenMCT. OpenMCT is a very cool project. It's really old, like 8 years old, 9 years old. It's developed by NASA. And if you imagine NASA Space Control, and they're sitting in that room, they've got all these boards up on the wall and screens, OpenMCT is the open source version of that. And it's a Node project, right? So I can just run Node example server, and it will pop up. We can click on that link. And this is their example one. So I've got an example spaceship. I can see the fuel, and it will update over time. With that, I've got thrusters. I hit enter. I'll go back here. I can turn the thrusters on. You'll see we're now getting like on level. The fuel should start to drop because we're burning through fuel. We should be getting data packets coming in. And it's got a whole thing that you can build any type of dashboard you want. You don't not limited to space stuff. It's just their example one. It's just kind of cool like that. This is 8, 9-year-old. Actually, does the dates here show us? No, they'll be today's date. Actually, it'll be a Git log, right? There you go. That's the last time. That one is 2024. They've updated it. Yeah. So at least oldish. Right. So, can we take something that was never built for Deno and just run it, right? How compatible can it be, right? So let's do example server, server.js, and you'll see here it comes up with a lovely warning message and no work being done. Basically, what it's saying is that Deno will support CommonJS files, but it really doesn't want to. It's quite happy to support them in the libraries. If you're bringing stuff in that uses CommonJS, that's fine. But if you are writing your own code, first-party code, you should be using modules. So here are your various options on how to do this. This has got to be the best error message ever. Like, don't do require. This is a line. This is why. Here's a hint to fix it. There are docs. I mean, it's amazing. So what we can do here is I'm going to say A for don't prompt me for any permissions. I'm going to add in the unstable detect CJS, which I literally just got from that, and rerun this, right? And that's JavaScript, right? Like, not TypeScript. And we can turn our thrusters back on, refresh in here, and there it runs, okay? You can't, one of the big goals of Deno is node compatibility. So if you are making your apps today and you want to move over, you can do that. And why would you want to do that? Deno is like twice as fast to like 10 times as fast, depending on your tests in terms of performance. If you want to handle like twice as many connections to your web, like on your projects, like for your web server or your API, Deno can do that for you fairly simple. So that's like a whirlwind tour. It will help you be more productive. But in summary for that, I mentioned it's web standards runtime. Everything in your web standards works the way it should do. Fetch is a great example. Fetch just works the same way you type fetch in the browser. Supports JavaScript, TypeScript, and the JSX TSX files. We saw that it has a test runner. I didn't show you, but it has a linter to check your code formatting rules built in. It has a code formatter so that you can make the code look better before you send it for a pull request. It also has an ability to make an executable that can run on any platform. So if you just want an exe file and to give that to somebody and runs on Windows, or you want an executable for Mac or an executable for Linux, you can write that in Deno. You run a command, it spits out a file. We looked at some of the security stuff as well, with like making sure you're not in trouble with supply chain attacks. We looked at some of the Node.js stuff. I mentioned some of the high performance. And finally, it runs in the cloud too. If you are running on things like Google Cloud Run, it works perfectly fine there. There's fully supported options, and they're working with like AWS and Google and Microsoft for like their serverless functions as well. So with that, if you would like, not the 15-minute version, a much ridiculously longer version, okay, there is a video up from DevFest. Not only do I talk about Deno in that, I talk about Bun, which is another thing like Deno, and I go into a lot more detail on these. And I have like tests where I show you the performance and all kinds of stuff. If this has got your interest, it's worth having a look at that. And you can find it on the GDG website. And that is me. Thanks so much.
Thanks so much, Robert. I think the Deno mascot alone makes it cool.
Yeah, the little dinosaur.
The little dinosaur, yes, yes. But we have time for questions. Also, we have the lovely T-shirts as well for people who are brave enough to. It can be any question. It's fine. The T-shirts we have in different sizes. So I see there's a question at the back. We don't have a. Do we have a mic? Oh, yeah.
I want to ask about the version. I imagine this is the latest Deno you're running. This app, you said it's like a legacy app, but will I be able to install Deno and run like Node 16 or are there versions of Deno take the certain versions of Nodes or that?
Okay, so for the people on the call and here, like how does Deno and Node versioning kind of align together and how do they work? Deno is in completely from scratch written, so there's no alignment on that. There will potentially be some places where you run into some weird Node, like this thing only works in Node in like a certain version, whatever, and you need a certain parameter. Deno does have polyfills available, so you can actually go like import this from Node if you want. But it's entirely its own runtime, so it's not under the covers, like just calling back to Node. It's its own thing. I think it's written in Rust as well, so it's like that's part of how it's blindingly fast. Yeah, so you don't have that sort of worry. As long as you write your job, it's just take your JavaScript, put it in the new runtime, and off it goes. Yeah.
Thanks for asking a question.
Cool. Do we have another question? Okay.
So,
what's the process of so you have an existing project.
Mhm.
So is there a process? Is it built in, or is it something that's easy to do? Or
Yeah. So the question is, if you have an existing project, what's the process on, like, if you're on Node and you want to switch to Deno? I've done a bunch of them. Generally, day one is like, sit down and you tell people Deno is going to be awesome and we're all going to love it. And then you like Deno in it, like Deno, like move over the package file to the Deno.js file. And then you're like Deno run and something probably will break, because as much as it wants like Node compatibility, there are some weird edge cases where it just doesn't. The one I ran into recently is serial ports. If you need to work with USB, it's a little like there's no polyfills, no way to get that Node stuff over. But if you're not working with USB, it should be fine. You won't run that one, for instance. So you run that. If your app's fairly straightforward, it just runs. You don't have to do anything else. You're just done. Just change your build process, change your deploy. Otherwise, spend a bit of time doing that. There are Deno specific APIs though as well. So if you are doing like Node's file system things, you can replace that with Deno's versions. And you don't have to do that immediately. You'll still, in the video, I have a thing where I show, we read a file, a really large file with Node, and then we read it with Deno, and we see how fast we can literally read stuff off the disk. And it's like, 80% faster or something ridiculous. And normally what happens is you kind of move everything, get everything running, and then, start chiseling those away over time. The one project I did, I think it took us like a couple of weeks of just every time, like we were using it and we're adding features, and then we go, okay, here's one thing, like let's just fix this file today, and we'll fix that one file. So it's very nice in that respect. Yeah, as long as you don't run into like any majorly weird things, but there's often a way around them as well. But yeah.
I do, but I'll maybe ask follow-up questions.
Oh, sure.
Okay, we can just have one last question. We're going to have time at the end for other follow-up questions. You can go ahead.
So I'm wondering if Deno is a runtime in like serve a production application, or you need to couple that and then add to something.
So the question is, if Deno is a runtime, could you serve actual prod stuff off of it? You absolutely can. It's this way to think of that in honesty is like Node Express. It's the same with Deno. Do you want to, the scenarios where you're going to put Nginx in front of that because you want to reverse proxying, you probably still want to do that with Deno. Like, that said, because it just is so much more faster than Node, you might find that you don't need to do that in some cases, because you don't need, like, you're not trying to keep the load off. But yeah, it's almost one for one in that sort of scenario.
Cool. Let's